and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I'm your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined by my friend Mike.
Hey.
So today, we are going to be delving into the Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 1, which is titled...
Elven Kings Under the Sky.
3 Rings Under the Sky. All right.
Yeah.
So, before we get...
I can't wait to talk about that.
Before we get into the episode discussion here, I'm just going to give out the typical reminders. If you want to get in contact with the show, you can send us an email, which is fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com. We're also on X, which is @fantasyrewind, and Instagram, which is @fantasyrewindpod. All right, Mike, without any further delay, let's dive into the rewind.
Fantasy Rewind. All right, Dylan. So this episode obviously starts off Season 2. Season 1, we had mixed feelings about, and I know the fandom in general also has mixed feelings about. I think it's going to be kind of fun for us to sort of take a look at this season in comparison to last, because I think by the end of Season 1, we were both kind of like, now it feels like the show is actually getting going, and even though we weren't quite maybe thrilled with some of the choices made that differentiated from the lore or traditional story, we kind of ended, that was at least my ending, was like, or the ending for the first season was, oh, okay, the show has finally started. There was some good stuff in there. Didn't love some of it, but ready to go. Season 2, Episode 1, how are you kind of feeling?
I'm pretty much feeling exactly how I felt at the end of last season. And by that, I mean lukewarm, wanting to like it more than I do. But I'm still finding myself to be disappointed by a lot of the creative choices that are being made by these writers. And I don't see that changing. Now that we've had a full season to kind of see what they've done, and getting a taste for Season 2 after they were able to get some feedback from the audiences, I don't really see them changing their style too much. And the issues that I had, the primary issues that I had, I really don't see going away. So I think it's unfortunate for me to say that, but that's really the vibes I'm getting from Episode 1 here. What about you? What were your initial impressions of the episode here?
So, I didn't hate it. And I didn't leave feeling upset about anything, really. Because I think I've just sort of reached this place with Rings of Power, and then I say that now, and then there's going to be an episode that, like, irks me off. But I've reached this place where it's like, it's fan fiction.
Oh, it's 100% fan fiction. It's definitely fan fiction.
And that's okay. Like, this is their interpretation. I think it's a beautiful world they built. What's funny to me is, like, all the nods they make to the movies.
Yeah.
Especially in this episode, that I found myself catching a few with the rings and such like that. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive in here and jump into some of the story. I will say them starting off with a fill-in, if you will.
Yeah, filler episode.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is it's a sort of a setup episode, right? A recap-y kind of episode in some senses. But what I meant is they sort of filled in a gap in what happened to Sauron, how he ended up as Halbrand on the boat.
Yes.
I like that decision. Now, we'd already talked previously about the choices they made with making Halbrand after he was assassinated by the orcs. Well, at that time, not Halbrand. Sauron is assassinated by his orc minions as he, like, tries to crown himself. And I love that scene. I told you that. I thought the whole, like, orcs being like, we're not going to, we just got out from under Morgoth. We're not just going to follow you. I think really, I like that. I know they're humanizing the orcs, and you have mixed feelings on that because of, that's not how they were written. And I don't disagree. They're evil creatures. But if we were looking at it from a lens of, at one point they were trying to make their own way in the world, not just be subservient creatures, this is kind of an interesting sort of take on that. And you can see where eventually it would turn into the Uruk-hai and everything else down the road after they've been under the influence of the One Ring and basically ground into a species of slaves.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I had the biggest problem with this scene here was the venom-like goo that Sauron ended up turning into. And my biggest problem with that was just like, I was finding myself questioning what I was watching. Because it looked like Sauron's essence was like leaking out and then like just like trying to latch on to anything else that would come in contact with it. And it really just reminded me of like those like parasitic alien movies, which is what the symbiote in Marvel is. So, like for Venom and Carnage and stuff like that, it reminded me of those like symbiotes rather than like a sorcerer's essence. Because when you see him kind of like shoot up and like launch his like light out of his body, that was basically him giving up that form of himself. But like I think that it would have been a much better way to do it is when he shot like that light out of his body, it like you see it go and then you see it kind of like travel through the sky and like come down in a different form or like into someone else's form as they were dying or something like that, and him taking over their body that way rather than like this alien like thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. We talked about that off recording.
Yeah, that
was an issue I kind of had too. I was just like, don't love this.
I will say though, I did like the scene a lot with Adar like stabbing him in the back with the crown.
So cool.
And the other orcs getting in on it too. But like the other thing is like that whole scene was basically just like Sauron saying, "Look at me, look how great I am," like needing to get a crown from the orc minions that he had there, which I thought was a little weak, but it is what it is, and it led to an interesting, cool scene there of like the orc rebellion against Sauron.
And it's really their way too of recapping like what happened in the first season.
Yeah, totally.
And honestly, it was a good way. It wasn't like I watched it and I was like, okay, cool, remember everything.
And one thing that you did bring up, which I thought was really good, was you mentioned the One Ring. At this point in the story, Sauron does not have the One Ring. So once he gets the One Ring, is that going to be the catalyst that he uses to like amplify his will, to bend the orcs to his will, and to enslave them all?
Well, and this is one thing they keep kind of bringing up. The rings, their purpose is power over flesh.
Right.
Right? And so each ring sort of... Now, the Elven rings are a bit different. They're, at least lore-wise, they're defensive, and they do have power over flesh in the sense that, like, they can... Like, one is, like, healing. One's, like, timelessness. One's, like, motivation. The fire one is motivation. Yeah, that the shipwright has.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I don't remember their names. Inya, Arya. I don't know. Well, anyway, I kind of want to jump to a few different storylines. The elf one is the biggest one, so I kind of want to do that one separately.
Yeah.
We don't really see... We do see the orcs and Halbrand in this episode. So Halbrand's captured at the end of the last season. He's brought to Adar. He basically says, like, hey, I know Sauron's alive, and Adar's like, what? And he's like, yes. He's like, he's with the elves. Like, let me go to them, and I'll, suss them out or whatever, and help you. And it takes the entire episode, but Adar comes around and is like, okay, fine. Which I think is really silly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't just, like, kill him right then and there.
Yeah, like, what's he going to do to help you? Like, I thought that was a really weak, just in general, Adar's like, okay, you got to bend the knee, whatever, grovel to me, and I'll let you go do this. Like, it just seems so...
Well, and something else that happened for all the humans that bent the knee to Adar, they got branded. And so I was like, is Sauron really going to let himself be branded by this guy? And then it looks like they didn't require him to be branded.
Again, it just seemed really like just a plot point. Like it just didn't feel like it was super well thought out.
But I will say that one of the things that happened to the whole captivity of Halbrand / Sauron there was one of my favorite things of the episode, which was like the one evil old guy who was like working under Adar, being like a evil dude to everybody, Halbrand says to him, "I'm going to kill you." And then he ends up, taming this warg that is in his captivity pit and lets it off the leash. And after Halbrand is gone and the evil old dude goes in there, the warg attacks him and kills him. So I thought that was really cool, really poetic, and I thought just like a good scene in the show.
Yeah, agreed. Now, I would have liked them to have branded him, and then maybe like as he's leaving, he just sort of like
kind of puffs it off or whatever. Yeah, I mean, showing some kind of magical ability would be cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure he could have, and their justification for not branding him is then the elves will know, right? And his whole purpose is to go there and suss out Sauron. Like, what's he supposed to do?
Right.
That's sort of what doesn't make sense to me. Like, oh, yeah, let's send this guy to the elves. We'll send some orcs after him to watch him. And he's going to suss out Sauron. Like, and he didn't tell you anything, really. Like,
yeah. He didn't tell them anything that they didn't already know.
Yeah. That was kind of my thing. It just didn't seem like okay, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here. Why are you letting him go, really?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of the end of the episode. Halbrand shows up, and Celebrimbor is letting him in. And we know that's going to be problematic. I do have a prediction on that, and I'll share it right now if you're cool with it.
Yeah, go for it.
So we do know that in the elves part of the story, it's finally let out that Halbrand is Sauron. Galadriel, shares that with Elrond, and Elrond's so upset about it. Again, I was just like, why are you mad at her? Like,
yeah,
she hates Sauron.
Yes.
Why do you think she would knowingly do this? Obviously, she was deceived.
And Sauron is the great deceiver.
Correct. So, anyway, but they basically sent a message to Celebrimbor that, hey, Halbrand is Sauron. I'm thinking that Halbrand, like, they're going to find out while Halbrand's there, and they're going to kill him.
Yeah.
And then he's going to turn into Anatar, right? Or wait, was it Anatar?
The Lord of Gifts.
Yeah. So,
I think that's a very strong prediction. I think that's probably going to be what's happened, where he gets found out by Celebrimbor while he's there. And then, like, he sheds that form and, like, becomes this Anatar, Lord of Gifts form, and continues the work that he has already started with Celebrimbor and kind of poisons his mind that way.
Yeah. So, I think that's kind of it for Halbrand. We do have Celebrimbor at a new forge, and he's like, hopefully they'll use the rings. Like, it's very interesting because in the actual lore, the 3 elven rings are forged after all the other rings, without Sauron around, but they're forged in secret outside of Sauron's influence, quote unquote, and after the other rings. In the show's case, they forged them beforehand. Reason being is because the elves need to stay, and the rings provide that. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they sort of shift that narrative. I really don't think it's that big of a deal, but at the same time it kind of is, because those were like his masterpieces, and he wouldn't forge those you wouldn't do your masterpiece before you do all the like those other subpar ones. So I don't know.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that Celebrimbor, as much as like I like to clown on the actor for being older and everything like that, the actual character of Celebrimbor is like a famed smith in his own right. Like, he is like the greatest elven smith to ever exist.
Yeah.
And so for him to be able to create these rings of power on his own, that's not unheard of. That's not anything that would be like out of character for him. It is, like you said, like his own like ambition, his masterpiece, as you said. But like, yeah, I mean, it is kind of like within his own wheelhouse to be able to create these awesome things.
I know, but I mean, I don't know how they're going to go about like, oh, and now he makes all these rings that end up to men and all this, but they're like lower quality than the other ones.
Well, if you think about, like, that could be Sauron's influence there, like, mutating or, like, lessening the craftsmanship for mass production. Because they're needing to make 7 rings for the dwarves and 9 for the men, and then Sauron will create his 1 on his own.
Which he forges on his own.
Yeah.
In Mordor, so.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. All right. Let's go ahead and get over to the Harfoots. So this was pretty quick. You have they're heading to Run, right? You have Gandalf. Oh, sorry, the whatever his name is, the stranger, and the little Harfoot, and they're stuck in a circle, going around in circles. You know, kind of chit chatting, whatever, and he's sort of playing around with his power a bit. And oh wait, her friend shows up, and now they're all going together. And oh, the song that the Harfoots sing is how you find your way through this desert area. Just okay, cool. Now we're moving on. Anything you want to say about that?
No, I mean, it's all just setting up the flashbacks that or flash forwards, I guess, maybe, like the visions that the stranger is seeing, where it shows almost like a Saruman type figure there. Like, I think that they kind of are taking their inspiration for this dark wizard from Saruman, because that's like the stereotypical Christopher Lee looking dark wizard that we all know from the main trilogy.
Yes. So, speaking of main trilogy, let's get to the elves portion here. And I'm going to kind of jet through this here because honestly, not that much really happens.
Right.
Elrond throws a hissy fit because, oh, Sauron helped make these rings, and so we can't trust them. But Celebrimbor made them. But the knowledge came from Sauron. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're going to use them anyway because that's going to help us. Like, there's this giant debate about whether or not they should use them or not. Elrond's the only one that's like, we shouldn't use them. The king and Galadriel like, yeah, we should. Like, if we don't, then we have to leave Middle-earth, which means, hey, guess what, Sauron? You can just take everything.
Right.
If we use them, we can maintain our power here and stay. And that's sort of like, watched a few different videos, like trying to get caught up on the lore of the rings, because I really just wanted to know, what did they do exactly? Uh-huh. And when I say power over flesh and that sort of timelessness and all that, you think about who had the rings in the Lord of the Rings era.
Yeah.
Right? You had Elrond. You had the Lord of the Grey Havens, which I forget his name.
Círdan the Shipwright.
Círdan the Shipwright. And you have Galadriel. The elven domains that are still popping during the Lord of the Rings time are Lothlorien, Rivendell, and the Grey Havens.
Not for nothing, though, but Círdan is the person that does give his ring to Gandalf as well.
Correct, but it's only like...
It's like right before the quest.
Yeah, it's kind of... and that's sort of like the thing is like, it's when Gandalf came over, or there's a couple different like ways you can take it, but he showed up in the Grey Havens about 1,000 years before the Lord of the Rings events happened, so pretty close to then.
Yeah.
But, Sauron was out of the picture at that point.
Right.
It's interesting. That's kind of the whole thing, though, is that those rings help maintain the elves in that place. And that you sort of see that in this, because you have Elrond run away with the rings, and he goes to the shipwright, and this is all to sort of explain who he is and why he's important. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, we can throw him in this river or in the ocean, and Elrond trusts him to go do it. But then when they have a council and the king's like, oh, we're going to have to leave, the shipwright shows up and he's like, no, we're not, because I kept the rings.
What?
And then they put him on just like they had in the Lord of the Rings movies at the beginning, right? Like the whole hands next to each other thing, like looking at him. I was like, I wonder if New Line Cinema can be like, yeah, you're kind of stealing our shots a little bit. But either way, you have them getting the rings and, oh, the tree's blooming again, like the elves are all good. Now, some people may be like, well, in the Lord of the Rings movies, Elrond has the ring, not
Gil-galad.
Yes, Gil-galad. And that's because Gil-galad gives it to him before the big battle. And
before he dies.
Yep.
But so I have a couple things to say here that I want to see what your thoughts are. First of all, I understand why they did the whole, like, the trees are dying, the time of the elves is fading and stuff like that thing. But everybody who is a Lord of the Rings fan, and everyone who's not and has even just seen the movies, knows the elves stuck around and until well after this point here. So the whole, like, will we have to go, will we stay type of, like, argument they're having was really kind of pointless, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that part?
I don't disagree. It is kind of pointless, so.
And then the other thing I just wanted to bring up here is Galadriel. I think that she looks better in this season so far, even though it's only been one episode, than she has in all of last season. However, the last time that Gil-galad saw her, she was a petulant little brat needing to be sent back to Valinor, and because she wouldn't stop going after Sauron, and she never did stop. And then you are going to basically just, like, bring her right into your inner circle when you don't really trust her or know her. I thought that part was a little bit odd. And then, like, at the end, when she gets the ring, like, I'm sure Gil-galad had a litany of other elven lords that he would have deemed more worthy, at least in this show interpretation, than Galadriel to get the ring there.
I know. I don't disagree with you. If he had... It doesn't quite add up in that sense, right?
Right, because one of the things that the show has not done is show just why Galadriel is as respected as she is in the main trilogy. Like, they haven't shown her to be a wise woman who is one of the oldest elves in existence, because even at this time, because she did see the light of Valinor. She was born over there. And so she is, I don't think she's older than Gil-galad, but, like, she is, like, of that same, like, stature. And that just, to me, is not made clear in the show that Galadriel is to be as respected as she is.
Yeah, those are great points. I did struggle with that. And I think they could have done this maybe a couple different ways. Like, really, they could have had her and Gil-galad kind of talk, and, you know, maybe Gil-galad even come out and apologize. Like, hey, you know...
Right.
I know I shouldn't have done that. I'm just really worried about, you know, us not being able to stay here and everything else. And, you know, he could have done it something like that, and they would have made a little bit more sense. But her just getting the ring, like...
Yeah.
You know, or even maybe, Celebrimbor in a note with it was like, one of these should go to the oldest and wisest. You and Galadriel, and you choose another person. Like, I think that would make the best.
Right, and I mean, something else that didn't happen, which I really wish did, and you just hit on it, was Gil-galad admitting he was wrong to Galadriel for trying to send her away and doubting her when she said that Sauron was still alive and everything. Because really, what all has changed from that time to now, other than now Elrond is backing you up saying that Sauron is alive too. Because nothing else has changed. Gil-galad hasn't seen Sauron. No great war has happened to reveal Sauron. It's still you just trusting the word of Galadriel. Except this time she has proof that, you know, at least word of mouth proof that he is back. And just like the acceptance of that was way too easy. And if he is going to accept that, like, he should apologize for doubting in the first place. But the last big qualm I had with this episode was how they treated the three rings like they were the one ring. Like, there was a temptation to use them, to put them on, and this this air of, like, possession of these people towards these rings.
Yeah, I agree. They really shouldn't do that.
No, because that's not at all how they are.
I don't mind them, like, again, I think what they were trying to do is like, oh, it's so beautiful and everything else, but they didn't do that. So
no, it was clearly like a temptation to take the rings. And that's what Círdan gave into at the end there, and that's what Gil-galad and Galadriel did as well, because you just like see the way that Galadriel in particular takes the ring and puts it on her finger and is like just staring at it, sparkling and everything. And you can like see this possession of them just like happening very quickly. And because these rings were not tainted by Sauron, like they should not be having that kind of an effect.
Correct. And we do know, like, the whole thing with Sauron is because, and I really don't understand this, but because Celebrimbor did receive knowledge from Sauron in order to craft these, like, the One Ring does have some sway over them or some dominion over them or power over them. It's not like the other rings at all, but it is like they can tell when the One Ring is forged that, oh, crap, like, someone's going to try and control it. Like, Sauron has sway over this.
Right, and that's like if they use their rings, because like they still wear them, but they don't like use their abilities.
Yeah, and again, like they can use it when the One Ring is not forged. Right. So after Sauron's defeated, and prior to him making the One Ring.
No, but like all in all, again, like I'm lukewarm on this episode, but to me, that's still like. I enjoyed most of it. Like, I did like watching it. I enjoy that there is a Lord of the Rings themed TV show going on. But there are still just, like, nitpicks I have, obviously, and I'm going to continue to have nitpicks, and it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is, as long as it's enjoyable, that's really my big thing. And this episode was okay enough where I did still enjoy it. What about you, Mike?
I enjoyed it. Enough. I'm interested to see what they continue to do with this season, and just go from there.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us for this episode. So this is going to be Two Nerds signing off. We'll see ya.